All right, welcome in. Cube Show podcast, college football podcast, comes to you on Sundays. We're back on track. Should be able to keep up with this the rest of the way through. SEC Media Days might get in the way a little bit. We'll begin our season previews, probably rank some positions, things like that, after we get through a couple of more teams. One of the teams I'm most interested to see in the league this upcoming season are the Oklahoma Sooners. We're going to give you our spring review from this group, what we're hearing about certain position groups, players. Took a look at the spring game. Give you an evaluation of that a little bit. I think first half, a lot to learn. Second half, not much at all to really take away from this group. There are some big question marks. There are some areas of massive confidence that should be flowing through Norman, Oklahoma right now. But, of course, a lot of things are going to be different. So we'll talk about it. We'll discuss it. I did want to kind of go off track here for just a moment. And I gave this guy a shout out on my radio show, McElroy and Cubelic in the morning in Birmingham on WJOX. But I wanted to give him a shout out here as well. And we had Father's Day not long ago. So obviously, you guys know I have 3 kids, 2 boys. I was able to take my oldest son to MLB at Rickwood last week. And it was our first Major League Baseball game together right here in our backyard, oldest park in America, celebrate the Negro Leagues. Just all of it was incredible. MLB did an amazing job. Please come back. The guys at Rickwood did an amazing job. Never felt threatened, never felt scared, never felt intimidated. There was no danger. They did a great job upgrading the park, having the concourse and everything outside it was unbelievable. Fortunate to be able to go, fortunate to be able to take him, fortunate to have a little extra access with some of the media stuff. And that got us to meet a couple of different players. A lot of guys that were super cool. CC Sabathia, Ryan Howard, excellent guys, really cool. Albert Pujols was actually really nice, great to my son. There was one Major League player that turned him down. He was a little bummed about that, but he also didn't know who that player was until 15 minutes earlier. I started to describe to him how great he was. Either way, sometimes certain folks don't get a lot of shout-outs. Backup catcher for the San Francisco Giants, Kirk Casilli, played his college baseball at Vanderbilt, actually. Went out of his way to talk to my son, have conversations with my son, like giving him 5, let him hold his bat, talking to him about hitting, playing baseball, like just regular conversation. Got around in the cage, came back, talked to him again. Just nicest guy you could ever imagine. And most people are probably not going to talk about him a whole lot. Don't have a ton to say. He's not going to make headlines, but he's going to make our headlines because of what he did. And it just kind of goes to show you, like, people who go out of their way to do nice things for your kids, it's amazing how that's just a total game changer for you as a dad. So I wanted to give Kurt a little shout out. I know this is not really that platform or something that we talk about here, but it was an amazing time, and I appreciate what he did for my son. We had a magical day. He was a big part of it. So thank you, Kurt. Not that he listens to this podcast or anything. Wickles Pickles, wickedly delicious. They sponsor the show as always. We've got them in the house. Went and had lunch at Baumhauer's the other day. Free plug there, Bob. And they have multiple items with Wickles Pickles on the menu, so go check those out. They're fantastic. We love them. We snack on them. You should try them as well. All right, so Oklahoma. This is a team I had in the bowl game against Washington, so I feel like that it's probably a group that I feel like I know just a little bit. I'm sorry, Arizona, not Washington. Had Washington in the Sugar Bowl. I knew them a little bit more towards the end of the year, and you get some of the coach speak going into the offseason, what needs to happen. I had not spent a ton of time around Venables. I'll just go ahead and tell you that. But ended up really liking the guy. He told us a story about when he got his first job in coaching that he had this like 72 Oldsmobile Cutlass Supreme. And when he got his first check, he took his mom to Chili's and he paid for it. And he thought it was this massive deal, like a huge deal. But just very relatable. Kind of not the guy that I think that's been portrayed in the media in certain ways, but I had more confidence after we met with him and I had a chance to talk to him on the field before the game that he's going to get this thing right and do a great job at Oklahoma. When I say get this thing right, by the way, this team went 10-3 last year. The 3 teams they lost to were 29-11. It was at Oklahoma State, at Kansas, and then, of course, Arizona in the bowl game. So when you had a third of your team that was gone, including your starting quarterback. So it was a hell of a year last year. It's just, and this is where we've talked about maybe we're going to have to change our mindset and our approach a little bit. I mean, that team probably, possibly, good chance in the playoff last year. I don't know. But at 10-2, you're at least in that conversation. Good chance you might get in. And so now that's going to be different. That's going to be a totally different year. Like 10-3 last year, most people look at that. I'm sure most Oklahoma fans thought it was great, had higher expectations, but still they can recognize a good year when they see one. People outside of that just kind of, oh, okay, it was pretty decent, whatever. I think they're going to be able to get this thing right. You make a couple of changes. Obviously, Jeff Lebby goes and takes the Mississippi State job. A bunch of players are going to be out. We'll talk about those. Seth Luttrell comes in as the offensive coordinator. Got to visit with him in the bowl game. Known Seth for a while. Did a great job at North Texas, I thought, specifically bringing in talent at a place like that to have multiple players when you get fired be able to go start at other Division I programs, higher caliber Power 5 programs, I think says a lot. I didn't agree with that firing at the time. Some people did. But I think it's a very similar offense. It's from the same tree. A lot of the principles are going to be the same. My understanding is there have been some runs that have been added. There have been some concepts from more of a vertical perspective to stretch the field that have been added. So you do a couple of different things, a couple of different wrinkles here and there, but not a lot of it's really going to change. I know all that verbiage stays the same for the bowl game. It'll stay the same going into the year because Seth had been there on staff anyway, so we already knew it. But in comes Jackson Arnold as your starting quarterback. The previous coordinator, Jeff Lebby, told me straight up, most talented guy that he's coached, most arm talent of anybody that he's been around. And there are times that you see it. You see him in the bowl game. You see him last year's spring game, this year's spring game, some of the other bits and pieces of games that he was able to get into. The ball comes out different from Jackson Arnold's hand. It just does. The one touchdown he throws deep down the field early in the game where he's kind of stepping up in the pocket, you can see it. It's just like, whoop, it's a little quick flip. And that thing's going 55, 60 yards down the field. He just has that kind of ability, that kind of talent. When you see him throw the ball over the middle of the field, it's just like it gets to that spot faster than a lot of other guys' balls would. But he still can level the football. The accuracy still needs to come a little bit. I think the risk-taking portion of his game is something that's still a little bit of a concern for this Oklahoma staff. They're a little worried about the fact that he probably thinks he can make every throw and fit it in every window, and that's going to result in turnovers every now and then. You saw in the bowl game, and it's something I know they've tried to work through here in spring practice, now going into fall practice. That, I think, is probably a concern. 64%, 563 yards, 4 touchdowns, 3 picks last year. He's got better wheels than he gets credit for. They told us that in the bowl game. He ran it a few times. You saw him in the spring game, like he'll tuck it and run. They actually Seth told us like he loves quarterback power, like loves to call it, loves to run it, not afraid of it at all. But there are some micro concerns, I think, with just him going out thinking he can make all those throws, taking some risks, the turnovers. But leadership, I know he's apparently been out there trying to be more vocal, trying to do different things. And I think that's something that you'll probably see pay off for this team this year. The problem will be is the 5 starters in front of him are all gone. Now, to lose all 5 starters and be able to go and did what Oklahoma did, I think is probably about as good as it's going to get. There are some positives there. I mean, you went and got guys that have real playing experience. You get center Branson Hickman from SMU. Like there are portions of his game that remind me of Creed Humphrey. He doesn't have the length. He doesn't have the arm length specifically, but the way he kind of gets engaged and gets his arms inside and sits down, utilizes his quickness and understands angles really well. Creed was the same kind of player, just Creed had that power when he was at Oklahoma at the same time. So you go get him, you bring him in, you say, all right, you might be able to come be a starter. Gary and Hatchett comes in from Washington, a guy that's probably a little bit undersized, but athletic, moves extremely well. And this is kind of I guess this is part of it really with a lot of the Pac-12 linemen that we've seen try to go play other places. Not all, but most, is they don't really have that oomph, that power to just move people off the ball like a Nate Kalepo did on that Washington offensive line. But Parker Brailsford's going to Alabama. The big concern with him, size, and does he have the ability to really push people? Sometimes you don't have to have that. It's not the end-all, be-all. But I think that's a concern for maybe both of those players who comes in. Then at right guard, you go get Fabichi Nuwu from North Texas. Again, he does have the size, does have the strength. I've watched his film, has the athletic ability, but somebody that just doesn't have this kind of experience. And I think maybe size is something that, listen, when this Oklahoma offense has been rolling, the offensive line's been playing bully ball. And you can go back to that Joe Moore award-winning group with Kyler Murray. Like, Kyler was great running around. They had weapons they could get the football to. They ran it well. They pitched it out to the outside. Same thing with Baker when he was there. But that offensive line was moving people, man. Like Creed Humphrey, Cody Ford, those kind of guys, like Orlando Brown, like they got people off the football. And this might not be that type of group. I don't think that's the end of the world. You go back and watch the spring game and you see some of those gap scheme runs and how quickly things can open up. You see some of the split zone, which I think is going to be a little bit new, how much more they do in that, where you run a zone blade to the left and that splitter comes across, steal the linebacker's eyes. All of a sudden, the back hits it north and south. Things like that are going to be something that maybe you offset it just a little bit with. I think having a mobile quarterback can offset some of that as well because you'll make people respect that backside just a little bit more. Do I think Jackson Arnold's going to get 18, 22 carries a game going right at a defense's teeth? No, it's not going to be that. But you do have that to at least offer to maybe offset an offensive line that doesn't pack the punch that some of your previous groups have. You still have Bill Beatonbow there, who's one of the best offensive line coaches in college football. So he'll get that group as close as he can. It's going to be a lot of new faces with a new guy calling plays, some new different plays that they're trying to put in, run those in a little bit of a different manner, and technically a first-time starting quarterback going into the season. That's a lot of new, but there's a lot to like when you go to running back, and we've seen Gavin Sawchuk play a little bit, got speed, got talent, been banged up. You go watch Caleb Hicks in this spring game, and it's almost like you're watching a miniature Le'Veon Bell. He's got the patience, the footwork, like the lateral bounce, and then just boop, like shoots north and south. Like he's got some Kerryon Johnson in him. Maybe not that big, but I love his ability to kind of wait, see, and then get north and south. Like he trucks a linebacker on one play right as he's coming off a little bit of a lateral move and then gets north and south quickly. So I think you've got a couple of good backs that are going to be able to help you there. Confidence, optimistic that maybe even Javonte Barnes could be somebody that helps this offense. But I think you're fine as far as what you've got at that position with Caleb Hicks, Gavin Sawchuk, especially if Sawchuk is healthy. Listen, those shoulders stay square, and he still has good feet, and he's not afraid to at least try to get downhill on you. At least that's what I saw some in the spring game. Hicks has a little bit more power and patience, so he just looks like an SEC running back. I think you'll be fine with what you have to pick from there. Sam Franklin, maybe, we'll see. But also, you look around the quarterback, and that position is going to be dynamic. Deion Burks was all world, all everything in the spring game. The transfer in from Purdue, 47 catches, 629 yards, 7 touchdowns last year. Only had 4 carries for 12 yards. And this is one thing I noticed about the spring game. A lot more misdirection, sort of end around, maybe force the ball into Deion Burks' hands, maybe find a way to keep things looking a little bit more sideline to sideline, to keep defenses on their heels, force people to play them in a little bit of a different way. Just something that maybe Luttrell are going to try to add to be a little bit different for this team than what they've had in the past as far as how much of it. But Deion Burks can be dynamic. I mean, he's explosive, middle of the field. You saw the deep post that he catches. Then you see like a deep crosser. He's wide open on him. Not only can he find space, not only can he create, run after the catch, can get on top of a defense. This kid's going to have a monster year. And you got a couple other guys around him that I think are going to be able to offset that a little bit. Nick Anderson's your prototype outside wide receiver, a bit of a bigger body. Jaleel Farouk is going to be more your catch and run guy, so he's going to help you in kind of the screen game, a little bit more of a running back body. So he's somebody that helps you in a little bit of a different way. Jaden Gibson, tall, long, athletic. Kwesi Petway, good speed, kind of unproven, but a guy that can run that I heard positive things of around the bowl game and then heading into this season as well. So you've got numbers at receiver along with at least one that is mega dynamic, like game-changing dynamic. Deion Burke's a freaking dog and might be the best football player on this team. And considering the quarterback we've talked about and some of the defenders we're going to talk about, that's saying a hell of a lot if he ends up being that kind of a guy on this football team. So that position, I think, is one of strength. You even saw like Ivan Corion make a couple of plays, the big 6'6" kid in the spring game. That's just maybe another red zone threat, bigger body that you can use at different times. Don't know if he really comes on this year or not, but did show a couple of things there. The problem is not only going to be offensive line, but what's next to them is going to be tight end. I just don't think it's a strength. Could possibly Bauer Sharp come in Southeast Louisiana transfer who I've been told runs a 4.5 or in the 4.5s, 6'4", 250, super athletic, very willing blocker, but it's a different deal, man. Like SEC edge defenders are no joke. And I got a couple of assistants in this league that I have talked about multiple times of leaving tight ends on elite edge defenders. Why the hell you would ever do it? Just don't do it. If you want to be there as a guy that chips or helps a little bit, but you can't leave these kids one-on-one, and actually saw them get beat in the spring game in a one-on-one. You can't do that. And this offensive line might not be able to protect well enough, even though the first group did look pretty good in protection in the spring game, to where you're going to be able to offset that in a certain way. I don't know how much straight drop back they're going to run early. I think it's going to be a lot of slide protection, a lot of RPO, a lot of play action protection to kind of get things going and get comfortable before they just say, all right, here's your 5-7 step drop plan. Here's our 5-man protection plan. Like, I don't think that's going to be a big part of what Seth Luttrell does early. But the tight end group, just not really a strength. Jake Roberts had surgery, not around for spring. Could he help? Yeah, sure. I think they think that Davin Mitchell can come in and do a few things, maybe help some, but you're talking about a young kid at that position. Don't know exactly how far that's going to go. So offensive line coming together. How does that happen? Is that going to work out? Can that be a strength of the football team? Don't really know. Tight end, is it deep enough? I know Joe John Finley wants to get those tight ends involved just a little bit more. Is that going to be able to happen with the numbers that you have right now? It doesn't feel like that's an area you should be confident in. So that's kind of your offense, where I think you'll still get a lot of the tempo, a lot of the pace. And keep in mind, going into this time, like a year ago, you had 63 new players on that roster. So to be able to kind of turn it and do what they've done already, and now be able to add some of what they have with what's returning, I'm interested to see kind of how it holds up, because it's going to be very interesting to take a look at exactly what this team is and what they're capable of doing. That offense is going to have a big part of it, and I think that offense could be one that's pretty special this year. All right, defensively for Oklahoma. By the way, never forget Blue Delta jeans. You know they're a sponsor of the show. Premium denim, comfortable, stretchy. You can dress them up, dress them down. Go to bluedeltajeans.com right now. They'll fit you digitally, and they're custom fit for you, not for anybody else. So you know they're going to be exactly what you want. They're going to feel and fit exactly how you want them to. Go to bluedeltajeans.com. When you talk to them, tell them you heard about them right here on McElroy and Cubelic in the morning. So a couple of the guys that are going to be out. Dylan Gabriel, of course, gone. Drake Stoops, who was incredible in the slot last year. Tyree Walker was pretty good at running back. Not going to be back along with those offensive linemen. I think that's all okay based on what comes in and what returns on this Oklahoma offense. Defensively, though, everybody was terrified about what this defensive line was going to look like inside until you go get Demonic Williams out of TCU, a guy who can play. He can penetrate, disrupt, big enough to hold the point. Like, he is an SEC defensive tackle. He's an SEC nose guard. Wherever you want to line him up, whatever you want to do with him, like, he can handle it. You'll have Dejon Terry back at nose, which hold the point guy, strong, rugged, old school. Like, he's one of those elder SEC defensive tackles that's just been hanging on. Not a lot of twitch anymore, probably a little beat up, not going to get too far away from the line of scrimmage and make a play, but he's also not going to let you down a whole lot inside. You look at, also inside, like a Grayson Halton maybe help you a little bit. I don't know what confidence you have that he's going to be super disruptive, but there's two freshmen that maybe could help. Jaden Jackson, a little bit ahead of David Stone right now, technically, fundamentally, like just from a football player perspective. Both of those guys could see some real reps this year. Problem is, the more freshmen you have on the field, the more mistakes are going to get made. That's just the reality of it. And up front, those guys get their shoulders turned one time, and it's out the gate. Or those guys decide to take a play off, all of a sudden, here comes a counter or wham play, it's out the gate. So how much can they be relied upon this season? We don't really know the answer to that, but what I do know is outside that group, the edge should be pretty good. You got Mason Thomas back, who was dinged up a lot of last year, probably the best pass rusher on the team, explosive, our Mason Thomas, that is going to be able to be back in there, hopefully be healthy, give it a go. Ethan Downs, we've seen what he can do. Saw him in the spring game, tackle for loss on the reverse, setting the edge really well. Like, he's a not super twitchy off the edge, but big, strong, rugged, like heavy-handed, like SEC ready out there on the edge of this defense for Oklahoma. So that's a plus. Trace Ford's played a ton of football. Like, he's coming back. Adebawore, who at this time a year ago, fair enough, everybody said was going to be like super freak, bust out, 20 sacks, little stiff, just trying to run around guys, not always going to work, has to mold his game a little bit more technically and fundamentally, but he has the ability. You see him flash. There's a couple pass rush moves in the spring game where he's just like dip and rip and right up field, and there's nothing anybody can do about it. Probably needs to add a little bit more weight still, but somebody who I know has a lot of ability and can definitely help this defense. So the edges I'm not super concerned about. Just like linebacker, not super concerned about. Linebacker's going to be deep. Danny Stutzman back. For you SEC fans that aren't familiar with Oklahoma, you're going to need to know Danny Stutzman. Would have gone early in the NFL draft, decides to come back, glue guy on this defense, like a goofball in a great way for a locker room and a team. Like, brings the guys together, helps rally the troops, just makes plays, consistent. Played Mike and Will the last couple years, so like, he's versatile. He's got that versatility, and he's got Kip Lewis next to him who can friggin' run. So you've got him a little bit undersized, probably 210-ish, 215-ish, but can fly. And you got Stutzman there who can also make plays. Lewis Carter will be more of like your downhill physical thumper of a linebacker, a guy that can definitely sort of, add a little bit more physical capability to what you're going to be able to do. Kobe McKenzie looks the part, like really looks the part. Saw him flying around, making a couple of plays in the spring game, number 11. But, maybe not all there just yet as far as the understanding of how the defense operates, but it should be once the season begins. So you've got like 5-6 guys in this linebacking core that have played, have been in the system, a couple like superstar level players that's going to make this the strength of a team. So you don't have to have a lot of disruption up front. Protect these guys, protect this group, and let them run around and make plays. And they can be the stars of the defense. There's no problem with that. But I think they'll have more of an edge present this year than they had going into last year, which is going to help from a pass rush perspective, which will help in the coverage perspective, where Zach Alley is your new defensive coordinator. And by everything you hear, Zach Alley is going to call this. So I don't know what that's going to do for Venables in game. It's just another thing that's going to be a little bit different from this team, which is what gives me a tiny bit of concern about what they may actually end up being. So I don't think that any of those things are overly problematic as far as maybe not being bigger or more twitchy at defensive end, or having a new coordinator that's going to call the same defense. Gives Venables different times to do different things, and he'll still have his fingerprints all over it. In the secondary, you'll have Kendall Dolby at Cheetah. They're hopeful, think he's reliable, feel good about that. Billy Bowman at strong safety is a name that everybody needs to know. Once again, if you're an SEC fan trying to catch up on Oklahoma, superstar safety. Down in the box, plays like a linebacker, can run, loves to hit. Maturity, something that he's going to be able to bring. Pride, like, he's very deliberate in the things that he does. He's just somebody you want in your locker room, bottom line. And he makes plays. He's a big-time playmaker. So you've got Billy Bowman back on the back end of the defense. Gentry Williams at one corner, Woody Washington at another corner. You don't get a lot of size with those two, which is where I think they tried to update by bringing in a Des Malone and even like a Jaden Hardy at safety with a freshman who could come in and see some playing time because of some of the length that he's going to offer. Connie Walker apparently had a really nice spring, one of the most improved that they've got. But I think length is something that they were a little concerned about at the end of last year, tried to upgrade that just a little bit. I would suspect this defense probably plays a little more zone just because of the overall awareness that you have now at linebacker, safety, and corner. And you've added some length that you're going to be able to help with there as well, but that still could be a concern in some one-on-ones. So you don't want to play a ton of man if you're worried about length in the SEC against these receivers. But all in all, you've got the numbers for this to make a pretty solid defense. And you've got the numbers offensively, at least from a star power perspective, that if a couple of things come together, it could be pretty good. I think this is right now an underrated team in all of college football. I think it's a team, if some of those things that I mentioned do kind of come together and do kind of sort of figure themselves out, that, yeah, later in the year, they could be knocking on the door for a playoff berth. Keep in mind, though, you've got at Missouri, Alabama, and at LSU in your November. So knocking on the door for a playoff berth, November the 2nd when you play Maine, is going to be very different than what we're talking about November 31st, the day after you play LSU. But you've got Temple, Houston, Tulane right out of the gate. First off, do not sleep on any of these. Just don't. Because I can tell you right now, Houston's going to be a solid football team because Willie Fritz is a solid football coach. They'll be ready to play, and they'll be good. John Summerall's team is going to punch you in the face, and they're going to expect to be punched back, and they're not going to have a problem with it. And they're not going to rely on one style of ball to have to go out there and win the football game. We've had some people on our show in Birmingham say that they think that this Tennessee game, which would come next, open up with Temple, by the way, could be the biggest game in the regular season in the history of Oklahoma football. I'm not saying that because there have been a shit ton of massive regular season games in the history of Oklahoma football. I'm not going out on that limb, but for certain people who follow that team to even throw it into that category, I think is massive. It shows you what that's going to mean with Heupel coming back. Obviously, first SEC game, member of the SEC in conference, going to be huge. But think about everything mentally and emotionally and all that goes into that game, and then you're at Auburn the next week, which is a very difficult place to play. You'll probably get in the afternoon, and then you'll be off, and then you'll go play Texas. You got South Carolina at home. You're at Ole Miss as well before you start that November. The road schedule scares me. It does. And I'm not really going to be one of these guys that's going to get on any of these shows and tell you, oh, Oklahoma and Texas are not ready for the SEC schedule. First off, they've known they're coming in. They've recruited towards it and for it. They know it. They get it. And badass players are badass players. And both those teams have badass players. So I think when you're looking at exactly what this team is capable of doing in the SEC this year, are they going to be in some dogfights? Yeah, absolutely they are. Are they going to be they're tough to win because of where they are? Yes. Teams going to match up better with them? Occasionally, yeah. But they've got the top end players to compete, and they have a couple positions that need to come together. If they do, you got a quarterback that can go win you a game. You have receivers that can take over a game. You have linebackers and safeties that can take over games. This middle of the defense should be solid. So to me, it's, do you have to bank on the tight end, and what is that position if you do? Does the offensive line come together, and how much can they become a responsibility for the team winning or winning in spite of? Like, where is the offensive line in regards to how and why they're winning or losing football games? It's going to be interesting to see. They got some tough venues that they got to go to, but I think there's a lot of reasons to have confidence in what this Oklahoma football team can be this year. Got to cut down on the turnovers. Got to protect your quarterback. A couple spots got to stay healthy. And I think they need real contributions from a couple of newcomers. Defensive tackle, maybe in the secondary, possibly at tight end. And I'm not talking play 50, 60 snaps a game. Just give us 8 to 12 snaps a game, be reliable, make a play for us every now and then. We get an injury, we need to lean on you for a game or two, be that guy. You're going to have that from a couple of freshmen on this football team this year. It's just what it's going to have to be. I appreciate you guys tuning in. Listen, we're almost at 10,000 subscribers. I feel like I've been saying that for 14 months. So if we could get there, it'd be really cool if I could stop talking about it. Please like, rate, review, subscribe wherever you're watching. We always appreciate that. We're going to be back with another spring review next week. We'll have a couple of teams left to knock out. So we'll get those done, and then we'll move into some preseason stuff and hopefully have something special for SEC Media Days. We'll be back next week.